Hey everyone, welcome back. And thanks for being here. Today, I've got a story that's been sitting heavy on my chest for a while. It's about love, control, and the one moment that changed everything. My name's Damien, and this is how a single ultimatum ended my 4-year relationship. An ultimatum that revealed more truth than I was ready to face. It happened during a conversation that turned into a confrontation. My fiancé looked me dead in the eyes and said, "It's either me or them." She was so sure of how I'd respond. I always chose her. I always gave in. I was the peacekeeper, the one who avoided the storm. But this time, I didn't fold. And when I didn't, she didn't know what to do. But let me rewind and take you back to the beginning. Because this moment didn't come out of nowhere. It was the climax of a slow unraveling. I met Liliana at a friend's get-together one Saturday night. She walked in with a few girls I'd never seen before, and honestly, they were all breathtaking. But it was her confidence, the way she moved and carried herself, that really stood out. By some twist of fate, we ended up paired together during a group game. And though we weren't exactly the dream team, we clicked. It felt easy, like we had known each other longer than a few hours. At the end of the night, I asked for her number, half expecting a polite brush-off. But she smiled and handed it over. The days that followed were filled with casual texts, just light conversation. No spark, not at first, but then something shifted. One moment we were just friends. And the next, we were orbiting closer, drawn into something new and exciting. Dating her felt like finding something I didn't know I was missing. The chemistry was unreal. But the thing about chemistry is, it can sometimes blind you, especially when the surface looks perfect. Now with the clarity of hindsight, I can admit I saw the red flags early on. Moments where she'd get upset if I had a different opinion, or when silence would suddenly stretch across hours because I said something she didn't like. At the time I called it passion. I told myself she just cared deeply. I excused it all. Her affection always came with conditions, though I didn't realize it then. When I agreed with her, when I followed her lead, everything was good. She was sweet, warm, playful. But the second I voiced something different, it was like she flipped a switch. She would withdraw emotionally, toss sarcastic jabs, or guilt-trip me with lines like, "I guess you don't care as much as I thought." That kind of emotional push and pull does something to you. I found myself avoiding conflict, watering myself down just to keep the peace. I stopped speaking my truth. I started agreeing when I didn't really agree. I called it compromise. But deep down, I was betraying myself. Our relationship on the outside looked stable. We both had careers. She was in healthcare administration. I worked in corporate operations. But weekends were where I found my real joy. Every Saturday morning, I co-hosted a podcast with 2 of my best friends. What began as a side hobby became a lifeline. It wasn't just about mics and topics. It was about expression, connection, freedom. That podcast became my outlet. My therapy. My joy. Liliana never liked it. At first she just seemed disinterested. She'd roll her eyes when I mentioned it, or claim she was too tired to listen. When she did listen, it was only half-hearted, like she was just humoring me. I thought it was just a matter of different interests. No big deal. But her disinterest evolved. Every time I hung out with the podcast crew, she became colder. She didn't want to come along. If I texted her while I was out with them, her responses were dry or non-existent. When I came home, she'd ask suspicious questions, like she was trying to find something wrong. The tension wasn't really about the podcast. It was about the people around it. She didn't like that I had people in my life who reminded me who I was before her. Friends who challenged me, who encouraged me to be independent, outspoken, real. That threatened her control. See, Liliana didn't want to share space with the version of me that thought for himself. She wanted the version that yielded, that went along to avoid conflict. The version that was only hers. The podcast was the one thing left in my life that she couldn't control. And that made it a threat. As the show started growing, a few more listeners here, some sponsor interest there, I was ecstatic. It was finally something of mine that was blossoming. But when I came home excited, she met me with cold detachment. I'd share a new milestone and she'd respond with, "That's nice. How many people even listen to this thing anyway?" The deeper her resentment grew, the more I stopped sharing. I didn't want to dim my own light just to keep her happy. Slowly, our connection eroded. The breaking point came during a conversation that turned into a quiet war. She wanted me to scale back the podcast, to spend less time with the guys. She tried to make it sound like she missed me, like it was a request for connection. But I knew better. I looked her in the eye and said, "The podcast is the one thing outside of work that makes me feel alive. I'm not giving it up just because you don't like who I'm around." Her face changed instantly. She didn't expect that. She was so used to me folding, bending, giving in. But this time I didn't. Things got worse after that. We were engaged, the wedding plans already in motion, but it all started falling apart. Every little decision became a battlefield. Every conversation, another landmine. And then it happened. During yet another argument, she snapped. "Pick one. It's either me or them. You choose." She said it like she already knew the answer. Like she was the obvious choice. But she wasn't. Not anymore. I stayed calm, looked at her, and said, "I'm not giving up the one thing that brings me to life just to make you feel in control." That's when she took off the ring and told me I'd never see her again. She left, thinking she'd broken me. But in truth, that was the first time in years I felt free. Would you like the rest of this story to explore how life unfolded after the breakup? A week passed without a single text or call from Liliana. I didn't chase her. Then out of the blue she reached out. Her message was filled with guilt, accusation, and confusion. She claimed my friends had turned me against her, that I'd chosen them over us, and that I must have never truly loved her if I could so easily walk away from a 4-year relationship. I sat there stunned, not because I believed any of it, but because of how distorted her perception was. It felt like we were living in completely different realities. To her, I had betrayed her by setting boundaries. But to me, I had finally stood up for myself. I didn't argue. I ended the call before I said something I might regret. That conversation set me on a path of deep self-reflection. I replayed the moments I had brushed off, and for the first time, I saw the truth. Over time, love had transformed into submission. It hit me that some people seek a love that obeys, but what I wanted was a love that understood. A few months later, she reached out again. This time, she claimed she'd been working on herself, that she saw where things had gone wrong, and that she missed me. She told me she'd changed. I won't lie, hearing that stirred something inside me, but I didn't jump back in. I agreed to talk, to give it time, to see if anything had actually changed. At first it seemed different. She listened more, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe we could rewrite our story. But it didn't take long for the old patterns to creep back in. The subtle guilt, when I chose my podcast over spending time with her. The questions that seemed caring, but felt more like control. This time, I saw it clearly. I didn't wait for it to spiral again. I ended it early. Here's the thing I've learned. Sometimes, you need to experience the wrong kind of love twice before you can truly understand what's right. You need to realize that love isn't supposed to feel like a performance. It should feel like freedom. Once you experience that kind of peace, you can never go back to walking on eggshells and calling it romance. Looking back, I've learned some tough lessons, ones I wish someone had told me earlier. First, never tolerate emotional neglect just because you love someone. Love shouldn't drain you or make you question your worth every time you try to express yourself. In my case, I thought being a good partner meant avoiding arguments, letting things slide. But what I was really doing was shrinking myself to keep her comfortable. When you lose your voice in your own relationship, that's not love. That's something else entirely. Second, watch the patterns, not just the apologies. Anyone can say sorry after blowing up. Anyone can promise change. But the truth is in what they do consistently, not what they say once in a while. I got so caught up in the idea of the love I wanted that I ignored the reality right in front of me. An apology without changed behavior is just manipulation dressed up as remorse. Finally, when someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Don't keep hoping they'll become the person you've imagined them to be. She showed me, over and over again, that what she wanted wasn't a partner, it was a follower. The moment I stepped outside that role, even a little, everything shifted. If love starts to feel like a prize you have to win, instead of a place you can rest, that's not love. That's control. So let me ask you this. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? If someone you spent 4 years with looked you in the eye and told you, it's either me or the thing that makes you feel alive, what would you choose? I'm not saying it's easy, but sometimes it's necessary. If any part of this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of something you've experienced or someone you care about, do me a favor. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this right now. Sometimes, all it takes is knowing you're not crazy, that your feelings are valid, and that you deserve better to finally walk away. Thanks for sticking with me.